was confident enough to step in, not just to run a class or start a class, but she was teaching adults, and not one adult questioned it.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome. This is Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio, episode 738, with my guest today, Master Matt Nather. I'm Jeremy Lesnick. I'm your host here for the show. I founded Whistlekick because I love traditional martial arts, and I wanted to support and connect with other traditional martial artists. And if you look at all the things that we do, you will see that thread running through all of it. And the best place to find all the things that we're doing, whistlekick.com. One of the things over there is our store. It's one of the many ways that we cover our expenses and try to grow this company. And if you find something over there you're like, throw in the code podcast15 when you check out and you can save some money. Have you picked up a swag pack, a random assortment of cool stickers and other flat things that we can mail to you in an envelope inexpensively? It's $5. So go to whistlekick.com, get a swag pack for $5. And you're also going to get at least $5 back in a coupon for your next order. Anywhere from $5 to $100. Yep, we make it fun. This show, the podcast, Martial Arts Radio, it gets its own website, and it is whistlekickmartialartsradio.com, because we name things very simply over here. You're going to find 2 episodes each and every week. They get their own page with transcripts and more at that website, with the goal of connecting, educating, and entertaining the traditional martial artists worldwide. If you are also passionate, or at least acknowledge the value of that mission, please consider supporting us with a purchase, with a share, a mention, quiet thanks. I don't know, whatever works for you. We've got a Patreon that you can contribute to and get a ton of good stuff back, everything from merch to exclusive episodes. And if you want the whole shebang and the entire list of all the things you can do to help us out, it's whistlekick.com/family. All right, now today's guest is somebody I've known for a while. This is one of those people who popped up early on in Whistlekick days, and I feel like I know him well, but at the same time I don't, because we've not actually met in person, though by the time this airs, that will have changed. Timing is funny sometimes. Master Matt Nather is one of those people that I know I can go to if I want a strong opinion, and to some people, that might be a criticism. But if you know me, coming from me, that is a compliment. I really appreciate this man's support of our mission, his contributions to our efforts. And I was absolutely honored to get the opportunity to sit down and chat with him and learn more about his journey. And no surprise, a lot of synchronicity here between what he's experienced and what I did. So here we go. How's it going, man?
All right, how about yourself?
I'm well. I mean, you've listened to episodes. You've been around a while. I don't want to do an episode that feels repetitious for you, where I ask, roughly the same questions that I know you've heard answered quite a few times. So let's see if we can mix it up a bit.
Well, I talk, so you can throw whatever questions, I'll answer it. I mean, that's
one of the things that I've noticed about you. Whenever we have a discussion topic come up in any of the various things, you generally have a strong opinion.
That's fair to say.
Okay. Now, I don't say that in any kind of a negative way, because you always have behind that strong opinion really seems to be a lot of thoughtfulness. Now, I don't know if when the subject comes up, you go off and you spend time thinking and come back. But you've always struck me as someone who feels strongly about the things that they have opinions on because they have invested time and energy forming those opinions.
Usually, sometimes it's, if like a lot of your questions, but when I get home from work, Jenny will hey, shoot them at me, or it's as I'm walking in the door. So my mind's still in work mode, and I'm just, sometimes it catches right on, or I'll pick whatever opinion is against hers. Just to get the ideas bouncing.
Okay.
Sometimes I want to hear what her thought process is, because I know you know us both pretty well at this point. We're very sent to the board on everything.
Yep.
So
it's fair to say that you appreciate not just...
I'm very open to a lot of things. I have a lot of experience with a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
like you might be one of the few people that's trained in as many different styles as I have, even if they were brief. Like I think in a 2 year span, I have a heart problem, so I wasn't allowed to teach, train anything, and my boss found out.
Yeah.
So I trained in about a dozen different styles in that 2 year span.
Wow.
Lasted for close to a year. So I just got a lot of outside input, and there was a lot of I don't make it sound like foreigners, but like I had two guys up from Brazil that were teaching me jujitsu and Muay Thai. I had a guy from somewhere out in Asia that brought in this other random style. I couldn't even tell you what it was.
What now? We've talked on the show plenty about cross training, and you know we've beaten that subject. I don't want to say to death, but you know I think everyone out there, even if they haven't listened to conversations on that, understands the dichotomy there. Either you put all of your time into one thing, or you put the same amount of time into a variety of things, and we can imagine what those outcomes look like. But when people cross train, they're usually talking about, I'm going to do this other thing, or I'm going to train these two things simultaneously. If someone's going to train in a whole bunch of things, it doesn't even have to be a dozen, but like even more than 3 or 4 in such a short period of time, I don't imagine that's by accident.
No, I mean,
that was something that you sought out to do.
Once my boss found out and was like, I really can't let you do this until the doctor clears you. And you kind of leads into that strong opinion. Teaching has kind of become my biggest passion on anything.
Mm-hmm.
And if I want to teach something, I want it to be the most efficient, whether it's A, B, C, or whether it's things I pull from every different style. Because every style has the same base to a good extent, but their philosophy behind why and how and application varies.
Yeah.
So every scenario realistically has whatever application I want to be able to give as much as I can get.
That approach suggests an openness that was likely instilled at some point. Somebody at some point told you, be really open to a variety of opinions. Where did that come from?
I had a lot of bosses that are very narrow-minded, and I hate that approach. I actually had an argument with my boss this morning or last night, however you want to look at it, about the same thing. Because I am open, but I also have a very realistic expectation of how things are going to fall into play, and they're just, no, it's this every time. Like, no. Have you not been there? Have you not experienced more than, looking at paperwork side kind of type of deal? How can you implement something on the floor if all you see is printouts? You don't know the people, you don't know the team, you don't live the scenario. That makes sense?
Yeah. So to say it another way, your openness is in defiance of being told this is the right way.
Yes.
And you want to determine for yourself if that is in fact the right way. You are generally unwilling to accept, do it this way because I said so. That's not in your nature.
No, I want to know the why. Even if I don't agree with the why, there should be a why behind whatever you do.
Sure. And is that your attitude in all avenues of your life, or is that
pretty much? I think that's what I mean. People tend to either really enjoy my personality or they're very turned off by it. There's not much middle ground.
Sure. Sure.
I think that's actually what connected me with you the first handful of times we talked.
Yeah. Yeah. You and I are very similar in that.
We bounce back and forth and change sides just to get the other's opinion again.
Mm-hmm. Where did martial arts start for you?
So according to my mother,
if you got to ask her, you're going back a long ways.
Yeah. I wanted to be a Ninja Turtle. I don't remember much of that as a kid. I remember a lot more Power Rangers.
Okay.
But then in kindergarten, I had a friend, Jim, who did karate, and he was my best friend. And for years, I tried. My mom kind of shoved it off. And then somewhere around the age of 10, there was a buddy night at the school, and he brought me in, and I got a uniform that night. And that was it.
That was it.
Yeah. Yes.
What now? If you're starting at 10, I imagine you have some at least vague memory
Yeah.
of what it felt like. You might not remember technique, but I find people often will remember emotional content. Do you remember how you felt in that early martial arts endeavor?
I don't remember much about the buddy night, but my first class was actually the next morning because I could like go back.
Okay.
And the class was me and one other new student.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was both our first school class, and the instructor was Robin Walker, who actually probably ended up becoming one of my biggest inspirations as far as being an instructor,
Mm-hmm.
and got me to fall in love with teaching,
Mm-hmm.
which is really funny because I talk to her now, her whole personality has changed now that she stopped teaching all the time. But it was a lot of just high energy. She wanted to see what we could do because we were young kids. We're both about the same age.
Mm-hmm.
And we were kind of, I might have been slightly older then, because we were kind of coming to that cusp of that man strength that comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
She liked to play with that idea. So just what kind of noise can you get the pad to make? The bag can do. How far can you really jump today? We did a lot of jumping kicks for our first class, which as an instructor now, I'm like, really? But at the time, I was like, oh my God, that's exciting.
Well, just remember, tired kids are easier to get to listen.
Right?
If they are physically exhausted but still engaged, they're less likely to act out, my experience.
I'm actually working on that. I just implemented a little dragons class at my school for 3 to 5 year olds. It's one of my favorite class forever, but everywhere I've taught, it's already kind of been established.
Mm-hmm.
So the kids have someone else to kind of follow or pull from. But because they're all brand new, they all have no idea of structure. And with COVID the last few years, kid interaction's been very minimal. So they're all looking at each other like, what are you doing? Hi. This is new. This is exciting.
Yeah.
And they're just going to share stories with each other because kids are new to each other that aren't siblings. And I'm like, can you give me a little karate today? So we've been starting with a lot of like relay races or balance-esque drills or games just to burn that initial excitement down so we can focus a little bit.
Yeah. I've always enjoyed watching the way people teach that younger age group because you see some dramatically different approaches, and the one that I think works the best is kind of what you're talking about. You know, let's forget about teaching them overly structured forms and one steps and all these things, and rather just getting them to do basic physical things. Can they balance? Can they identify, left from right, and set them up for their next class when they're 6 years old?
That's actually exactly what the program is. It's how I even sell it when I bring many people in the office. There is karate involved, but at that age, you're still learning how to work your body. So we're going to learn a little bit of that.
Remember, kids that age fall over for no reason.
And they think it's fun. So you play with that idea a little too, but they learn how to focus. They learn what focus is.
Yeah.
What is respect? Oh, can I use that at home? Absolutely. Like your kid now goes home and puts their shoes away on their own. Like little stuff
cool.
that incorporate that with a little bit of learning how to turn your body and lift your leg. I kind of care a little bit less what the kid looks like, but as they get closer to that cusp of moving up into like a normal basic class, I don't push a whole lot on what they look like as long as they understand what they're kind of supposed to do.
Yeah. Did I hear you say that this is like your favorite class to teach?
Yeah.
Why?
The personalities are so raw. There's not that influence of I can be embarrassed yet. I'm afraid of what will happen. It's always like every time they come in, it's our first class. I'm excited to be here every time. It doesn't matter what we do. I'm here. And then the question is,
it's raw and it's real. And I think people that teach those classes love them or hate them for that reason, that it's so raw.
Instructors that feel the same way. a small middle ground, but it's you get excited to see them or you want to cry, but
Yeah.
you got to do it.
Oh, absolutely. Okay.
One of my favorite classes since I started teaching.
Nice. If you think back to the first times you were teaching that age group, right? Like I think we all remember, oh, whether it was intentional or not. Oh, I'm teaching a class of lots of very small ones. Okay. Whew.
I might have been like a blue belt, so like a year and a half to 2 years of training at that point. So I started assisting very early on because of when my brother started training.
Okay.
So I was getting ready to start learning to do that class, and it was my first time with that class, and we had a super upset parent. So the head instructor pulled them into the office and handled it. It's like, get these guys started, I'll be right out. And that was my first time meeting these kids. I had no clue what their curriculum was. And I'm this young kid sitting there like, they
How old were you?
like a kid. I'm still baby faced up. And I'm like, oh my God, it was the worst class I ever taught because I was just so not ready for that.
So how old were you? Start there.
12, maybe 13.
Okay, so this is not long after what we heard from you before. Okay.
Yeah.
Blue belt. What did you have them do?
We did jumping jacks. Well, a 3-year-old idea of a jumping jack.
Sure.
we did some stretches. I had them try to do like a punching exercise, just horseback stance, putting punches out there. We did front kicks. And I think I stretched that out for almost 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And then I know they ended with a game. So I pulled one of the other people in from the next class I was waiting in the back to help me try to do like dodgeball with them, which still didn't really go very well because I didn't know their names or anything really, just kind of what they told me at the beginning of class. So I'm like, we got you, you're out. And they're like, what happens now?
No, you said it was the worst class you ever taught.
Yeah.
But was it fun? Did the kids have fun?
They seemed more confused because they didn't know who I was. They didn't know what was going on. They weren't new to the class, but because I was new and I was still stumbling upon words and trying to figure out who they were, how to approach that age group for teaching. Like I have younger siblings, but to me that was different.
Yeah. So
it wasn't well. And it was almost like you have a substitute teacher feel, even at that age group.
And
you give them a hard time just to see how they'll react. So you're not my instructor. I don't have to do this.
You're not the boss of me. I'm not going to listen to you.
Yeah, exactly. And but now I look at it and I laugh really hard because I've had other awful classes. I'm like, it still doesn't make me feel like that. But
yeah, it's, I've learned over the years that when I'm teaching anybody, but especially young kids, and I'm sure you feel the same way, as long as you own the room and you keep the energy level up, everything else, it's not even secondary, it's tertiary. You can get them to do anything you want if you are confident and energetic. Usually if I teach a kids class, my voice is gone by the end of an hour.
Yeah, that's how I feel most nights. Sometimes I get home and my wife looks at me like, what's wrong with you? Oh, I didn't let you go and you're jumping tonight.
Yelling at children for an hour is great.
But it's nice because they're so young enough, whatever vibe you give off, they're just going to pick it up, even if it's not what they wanted. Even if they come in like, oh, I was outside all day, it was hot, I don't want to be here. But the moment you jump, you get excited, and they're like, okay, let's go.
For sure. If you're excited, they'll be excited because they don't know any better.
Yeah.
All right. So we're seeing, a bit of a theme going here, early on teaching, currently teaching, but we've got some middle that we've got to fill in there. So, less than a couple years in, you're a blue belt, you're assisting with classes. And even though you said it was the worst class you ever taught, sounds like it went pretty darn well to me. Did
For what
you?
it was,
Yeah, go for it.
it could have been worse. I mean, or it could have gone better, but it still wasn't like, hey, parents are pulling their kid from the school.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of just pushback, not a whole lot of effort because I didn't have a whole lot of effort to put in. I was
Mm-hmm.
timid in the thought. But after that, actually, I'm going to backtrack slightly. It might have been like 6 months before then. Because my brother would train and his class was before mine on Saturday morning.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd come in early. The instructor, Robin Walker, would pull me on the floor to help assist and do things. And I fell in love with that thought and the idea of learning how to do that. So as a green belt, I actually asked my instructor for a teaching job in the middle of a class.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Like you raise your hand and you're like, "Can I have a job? I want to teach."
What's going on? But like, I walked over. I've never been afraid to hear the word no. So I went for it. He was like, "When you get your black belt, we'll talk slightly more."
Okay.
So I got a lot of experience in assisting up to that point. For a while, I feel like I was at the school 4 or 5 nights a week. Even if I didn't train, I was just there. I hang in the lobby. I assist the classes they let me. At the time, it was a lot more kids classes than adult classes.
Sure.
I feel like in the last 10 years, most places kind of moved towards like the family vibe of it. So kids and adults train together.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of places in this area.
I'm seeing more of that. Yeah.
So anytime it was a kids class, I'd assist. Depending on who showed up, I was allowed to help with the adult class too if I didn't train,
Mm-hmm.
mainly because of rank.
So as someone who's doing a lot of teaching now, and you look back at all of that assistant instruction, because honestly, this is something that I find to be very polarizing in the martial arts. I've trained with instructors who, on day 2, they've got you teaching day 1 people.
I'll do that with people in class, but if I'm going to have like an actual assistant for the class, I want to have at least one rank above who's there.
Sure. Totally understand. But there's the other extreme, and I think we've already foreshadowed. It sounds like you're in the middle, but I'll finish asking the question anyway. Right. And then you've got people who say, you know what, unless you are, whatever standard, black belt, 2nd degree black belt, 5th degree black belt, you shouldn't be teaching anyone anything because you don't have as many of the answers. You don't have the details. How important to who you are as an instructor now was that time as an assistant instructor?
I don't think I ever really thought about it. I mean, now if you're in class, usually I don't do the same rank. I'll do the next one up even.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll be like, I've let you test on this, so I want you to be confident in the fact that I'm letting you show somebody else.
Sure.
So I want them to walk away looking like you. And then I play with the idea of verbiage, give them feedback, but sometimes I'll be like, I let them fail. But you need to have that fail sometimes to understand what's going on. If you don't try to explain it to somebody else, sometimes you don't even realize what you really do. Sometimes I'll do it for that end of it. Like, you don't do this right. But if I have you show so-and-so, you might realize what I've been trying to tell you. I've had quite a few students over the years where they'll be working with somebody and they'll be doing that, and all of a sudden they're like, you see that light bulb go off, and they'll just left field like, this is what they meant. Like, you realize you're still doing something, right? You got a student with you.
Pardon my yawn. I've been on both sides of that, experiencing that epiphany while teaching something. I remember probably 6 to 12 months into having my own school, teaching the first form, Pinyon Shodan, in the curriculum that I grew up with, that I was passing on, and doing a movement and just stopping. It was something to do. I don't remember what it was now. I remember roughly in the form where it was. Stopping, and the entire class went, what are you doing? There are more moves. And just saying, no, hold on. I need to finish this thought because it's 20 years in the making.
Right?
And going, that's what they meant. That's what they were trying to get through to me all that time, and I just didn't get it. Oh. Okay.
Yeah, especially in my slightly more recent years of teaching. I feel like I have a lot of those moments. Like as a practitioner, I feel like I'm okay. I'd say I'm average, but the reason I stay consistent for my training is I'm very intense.
Mhm.
So perception makes it seem better than what I think it really is. Like I never would have tested myself at certain points,
Oh,
but the intensity of the instructor saw that as something more.
sure.
Um, but as an instructor, I feel like I get a lot of my students to be better than I ever was, which is it makes me feel great. Like even my students that are I don't want to say lesser, but they don't put in the same effort. They're not they don't go home to practice. They show up minimal times a week, but they still want to be there when they're there. Are better than I was at Rome, or pretty close to that same
And,
cup.
and I think if we were to unpack it intellectually,
Yeah,
every instructor thinks that's their goal. And I've met quite a few, sadly. I'm not going to say it's the majority or even a large portion, but I've met a non-insignificant number of instructors who it is clear they are not willing to do that. They don't want their students to be better.
if they're not better than me, it can't grow. And that's my thought on it.
Say more.
Like I run a leadership program at the school.
Mhm.
I try to implement that wherever I end up teaching, so they can learn how to teach and assist. And I'm flat out, usually within the first class or two of them learning even just what a leader is, that in order for martial arts to keep progressing, to keep getting better, they have to leave better than me.
Mhm.
I want one of them to be able to replace me and then make students better than them. If I hold on to all the knowledge, eventually at some point that same knowledge falls off, it dies out. So the art takes the hit more than anything else, not just the student. Like I've heard a lot of stories that I've come through about the masters and instructors and all these high-ranking people before even my instructor, how they would do demonstrations and their thoughts to get people to their school. And I feel like a lot of schools hit a hard point there where they want to stop, and that was thought, and then it just, I'm the instructor, I want to be the best at the school. But why? Why do you have to be the best one?
I think, as with any motivation, there's a positive, there's a negative side. You should, as an instructor, you should want to be the best person, but you should be using it as positive motivation to yourself. But I think whether you're an instructor or not, you should always want to be the best. And by the best that you can be, not necessarily the best in the room, but being so good in and of yourself that you are the best in the room.
I think that's a little on my wording. Like, I mean, I want to be like, I feel like I'm at my cap where my best would be when I train and I do things, but I want that cost to be passed by majority of my students, if not all of my students. I want, if I think I'm a 5, I want all my students to at least be a 7.
But it doesn't mean you're going to sit on your butt and let them pass you.
I'm not going to let them. I'm not going to make it easy for them. But that's my end game. I want that.
Right. My original instructors were very open. This is, I started training when I was really young as a kid in Maine, and my instructors were very honest. They're like, we started a school because we wanted people to train.
I mean, I get it.
And if you think about that, and anybody who knows these two knows that it's a husband and wife that pushed each other, and there were those of us in training that also pushed them as we got better, and so they had to get better because they wanted to continue to show up to help us get better. So they needed to have more better to help us get better. Even if it wasn't their desire to be better themselves, it was their desire to be better so they could assist us in getting better. Because if you're a 5 and your students are 7s, it's hard to help them get to 8.
That makes sense.
So I think we're on the same page. We're just using slightly different language for it.
Yeah.
Now I want to go back because you've mentioned someone a couple times, and this is where the fact that I have a bit of a relationship with you and actually spend a decent amount of time talking to your wife. That may not sound wonderfully appropriate to those out there who don't know. But Jenny is in charge of our book division and helps run the tour stuff that we do. So I get a lot of time talking to her, and I know that this woman that you've mentioned, your original instructor, played a significant role in inspiring you. And I'm wondering if you might, to the point where she has been able to articulate things to me about someone that you first met 20 plus years ago. So that says something about the power of what this woman represented to you. And I'm wondering if you might say a little bit more.
I think there's a lot of little things that played much bigger parts into it than it probably should have. Because I was on my second, maybe my third belt, maybe training for a little under 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And she pulled me up to help start assisting the kids' basic classes. My brother was there.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole teaching thing clearly never went away. Mm. And she was a very interesting instructor. I don't think I've had anyone else like her. Like when I came through, we had a different instructor every day. Mm-hmm. Some were awesome. I connected with all of them on a certain level, but I hit like a very personal level with her. Whatever reason, our personalities meshed. And then as I became a slightly better instructor, I was allowed to assist the advanced class, even though I was still in the advanced class, even if I wasn't at the higher end of it. Mm-hmm. And then she did a lot of application and bunkai-esque things in class with a very realistic, hey, this is what you're doing. And as a young kid, I was like, what do you mean? And she used me as a guinea pig a lot because she know I take the abuse, but I take the abuse because I want to understand the why, what happened, where, what are they really feeling? And I was like, she was a little brutal, but I appreciate that because I want it to work. So that played a big piece. And then she stopped teaching somewhere around when I got my first or second degree. I think it might have been around my first when I started teaching, or as a paid instructor, I should say, because I was always teaching. But I was teaching at a different location. So we were kind of like a part of a smaller franchise. We had like 4 or 5 schools at one point. Mm-hmm. So they had opened a second school. I was teaching there, and she stopped teaching. And then about 4 or 5 years after that, because of her involvement with the association and different things, they had asked her to test, because she was a third degree. Mm-hmm. Asked her to test for her fourth, which was considered master's. So she started coming around again to do that, and I actually got to help train her for master's. So as soon as that happened, all the little small things she made fun of or said to me in class, stupid jokes, it all hit again, and it re-sunk in, and it just re-implemented all the things that I forgot she had done or said for me. And I feel like that instantly changed me as an instructor again. And I can't even explain how it sunk in.
I experienced it. And, I did an interview earlier today, and we spent some time talking about the value as a teacher, what a teacher hopes to get out of teaching. And, I think we could apply this to martial arts or really anything. And, it comes down to something pretty simple. You want to know that it made a difference. Yeah. You want to know that if you invest the time and energy in teaching someone, that they got something out of it. It may not be exactly what you hope they get out of it, but you want there to be some value. You show up and you teach and everybody leaves and their lives are not better in at least some measurable way at some point. Yeah. That's depressing. But what we're talking about here is someone who is teaching you so much that you weren't even aware of what was being taught, and it took further development for those lessons to even click in. Yeah. It's almost like the word that's coming up for me is like prerequisites in school. Like she was dropping things in that you couldn't even use at the time. But when it came time for you to maybe not need, but want them, they were there. She set you up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't even think she's aware of how much of an impact she's had on me. Like, we've had very small conversations over the more recent years. Mm-hmm. And it's more been about life because at this point I have my own kids and that's exciting for her. She's had, she has her grandkids that she got to spend time with and moved down south to live with them for a little while. And just because we had that personal relationship, because we spent a lot more time together as I was learning how to teach and assist and do those type of things, we've had that bond there too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's funny. I think Jenny actually has more conversations with her now through Facebook than I have in the last maybe 10 years.
She is a better conversationalist than you.
That's fair. I can't disagree.
Yeah. So when you think about that dynamic that, she set you up for so much success, are you aware that you might hopefully be having that kind of an impact for people you're teaching? That even come into your mind?
I feel like I have with certain students. I've actually had a few students who have opened their own schools at this point. There's a few that have actually surpassed me in rank. I think one of our first conversations was about me in rank. I won't go too deep in that so it doesn't get too controversial again, but I have 4 or 5 students now, I think, at some point. I mean, most of them have gone to other schools and instructors, but they've actually surpassed me in rank. A few of them have their own schools, and I've had the privilege of walking and seeing some of their students and them running class. And just the way they say or do certain things, I hope part of that is an impact because it sounds familiar from something that me and them may have said or something that has happened at some point. And
forget about the rank stuff for a moment. Let's just talk about the fact that somebody you taught, someone for whom you were not even necessarily the exclusive instructor, but a substantial component in their martial arts development. And they go off and they open a school and you go to visit that school and you get to observe what they're doing. How does that feel?
I don't even know if I could put that to words. Like it's almost like a kid Christmas morning. It's really exciting and it's almost really emotional. Like, I hope I played a part in them wanting this because how I impacted them, that they wanted to really be me, not just me saying I wanted that for them. And then seeing that they're passionate enough about it that they want to make this their career, their life. Like, this is where they want to invest. All the effects of the other side.
It seems to me, I have not experienced this. None of the students that I ever had went on to open their own schools. But I imagine it's similar to having a kid. It's the martial arts equivalent of having a kid.
It's how it feels. It's really odd. There's no other real comparison. It's my brother actually teaches too now. I think when I first started trying to get myself back into training, he had a couple of guys that were a little bit older. They could handle a little bit of rougher training. I'll say old school training, but more old school training where you could take the hits and give them back, and it wasn't like, hey, we don't do this here.
Right.
It wasn't an option. So I was trying to get myself back into shape and stuff. So I started teaching for maybe like 2 years. I stopped teaching. Just the way life played out, it didn't happen.
Now you've referred to it as you stopped training. Were you also?
I hadn't been really teaching at that point either. Like there was a couple, here and there where I know a lot of instructors that were like, hey, can you come and assist, come and teach a night or two? But it wasn't anything steady.
You took kind of a step away?
Unintentionally, just the way life fell.
Okay.
Moving and different things of that type of nature. But I went to go start training to get myself back into teaching shape. Someone wanted me to come in and teach on a regular basis again. I don't want to walk in looking completely awful. So I wanted to get back into training and doing a little bit of that before I completely hopped in a couple of nights a week. And my brother stopped class and basically turned it into how I impacted him as an instructor too. And I wasn't ready for that.
What's the age difference between you and your brother?
3.5 years.
You're older, gathering?
Notice, yeah. but hearing it from his end, I never realized. Like, I mean, I thought I had an impact on because he, runs his own, runs the school, what he wanted. But hearing it from his end, how I impacted him, and he wants to trade that same impacted students and different things that happened that made him want to be more. Just on the like the karate aspect of things, and he's sharing stories. I'm like, is that how it went? Like, it didn't impact me nearly the same way it did him. So that was awesome. Most of them knew who I was before I walked in the door. I never met any of these students, but they knew me from the things he had said in class prior to that. Even yes.
What was that like? Was that a burden?
I mean, it made me feel like I was on a pedestal that I was not ready, or I would say not ready for it, that I wasn't really worthy of. But it was weird because when I would assist and teach my brother's classes, it was still at the point where I was learning how to do all these things. Or they had, the instructors, like I said, we were part of a small franchise, so they brought me back to that school. So it was as he was really learning how to fall into teaching and assisting.
Yeah.
And that was my first time really having a steady instructor that I was teaching how to teach, not just I'm teaching how to hold pads, I'm teaching how to walk the lines for my class. You're actually doing this so you can step in and take my spot on the floor if I have to do other things. So it was a weird dynamic in itself, and we'd go home, and karate wasn't usually the topic, but time to time it would come up. So it was a weird component to hear that walking in the door. So the class shifted gears and went to that, so they understood who I was if they weren't aware of who I was. Like, they heard the story, but now there's a face. And now this is what that person did for me. I want to do that for you.
How old were you when you started helping him?
The same zone when I started helping him teach.
Yeah, that kind of bit that you gave there.
We'll say maybe 15. I was somewhere in that zone when I got my black belt, so it was in that area.
Okay.
Maybe slightly after that, but not by much.
Okay, so that's a lot longer ago than I would have expected based on the way you were talking about it.
I mean, if people wanted to be there more, we happily threw them in there to learn how to teach and do things. And I think it was at the same cost because we would have been that 12, 13 zone. So he moved up from the kids class to the adult class so he could help teach that kids class. And it wasn't like, hey, you're both 8.
Sure.
I have a problem with that, but when it's more of an instructor role instead of just learning, helping each other out in class, I want them to have a little bit more of an understanding of what's going on, what they're doing. Although I can definitely say I've had kids teach the adult class, so I can handle parents in the lobby. And by the way, we have our leadership program at this point. That actually might be my favorite sales story.
Let's hear it.
I was running a school in the city. I was a new instructor. I had just stepped in maybe 3 months prior to take over that location. Same thing, I implemented that leadership class. I was working with a couple of these kids that were mostly advanced members because the lower half wasn't quite prepared for that program. There was a lot I was trying to change and set up more for success instead of, hey, come to class, beat each other up, and go home. But I had a parent come in flipping out because we had recently taken over the school for the franchise as well. Contracts were changing, prices were changing, and unfortunately it all fell on me, so I always got to look like a bad guy. And they got really upset, and they came in during the adult class. The kids class had just ended. So the parent came in, they were yelling, screaming, they got all the parents riled up, so the office at the time was behind the floor, so they'd walk around the floor, they pulled me into the office, and I had this little girl, I think she was a red belt, who was maybe 8 years old, who was in that leadership class. And we had a room full of adults. I think our floor was packed, one of the bigger classes since I had been there. And I sat down behind the chair and I let them yell and scream and get mad for a little bit. And then I kind of looked behind them and just kind of pointed. And they all realized this little girl, who I've had minimal experience with realistically, I mean, I was only there for 3 months at that point, was confident enough to step in, not just to run a class or start a class, but she was teaching adults, and not one adult questioned it because of just like not just because I said so, but her confidence. She just went with it, and she had a pretty good idea of what she should be doing. So she went with that, and the class went, and everybody's attitude completely stopped and changed. And I ended up letting the little girl teach the majority of that class. I kind of just took over for Matt chat at the end. And I mean, to me, that was amazing. I was like, you can't say anything more. It spoke for itself. But this,
So what was the end result?
uh,
What did the parent do?
it wasn't the one parent decided that, they were going to stick around, but they didn't want to do a full big term thing. They want to see what everything looks like in 6 months. I was like, sure. Whatever makes you happy, I'll go for it. But come in and actually watch class. Don't just sit in the car, drop them off. Like, see the program. See why they brought me here. It wasn't like they did it as a whim because, hey, the other guy was leaving. They wanted to switch him out because he needed experience. They wanted more eyes on him. They brought me there to take over. They knew what I was capable of, even if I wasn't sure. Like our boss knew more of what I was capable of than I was at that point. In my head, I was still young. I was driving at points. I might have been like 17, but I was confident in what I would say and what I would do, even if I knew I was wrong. But they know if I knew I was wrong, I would go back to fix what I had said.
Where was that coming from? Because we've got this recurring theme here of you performing beyond your own perception. And that's not common.
I cap on myself, but I have a realistic expectation of what I think is going to happen.
Okay.
And I feel like quite often I surprise myself in what really ends up going and happening. And I'll be like, I don't want to set myself up for failure. So it's not quite that I'm okay with failing, falling. But I don't want to walk out frustrated because I couldn't meet my own expectations. So I feel like I set a bar lower than what it should be. Sure. And then they hit it, and I'm like, all right, I can't set it that way. They hit it, I can't drop it lower. But,
yeah.
I want to be able to walk home and still be happy with my night, with how everything went. Instead of always just frustrated. Because I worked with one instructor for a couple of years who every night I feel like classes would end. We'd sit in the lobby for an hour and a half just talking about classes. And he'd bum me out every time.
What do you mean?
Like, oh, this student couldn't get this. And it wasn't like he wanted to figure out how to get better at it. It was, all right.
Dwelling on the negative.
Yeah, they dwell on everything that didn't quite go right. Even just a small success. We had a special needs kid who all of a sudden he was capable of, like we were doing a lot of one-on-ones to see if he could handle the program. And we got him there. And he joined class. And even the kids in class that were next to him every time it would switch would help him without disrupting the class. Like they would make sure he could help follow along. And to me, that was amazing. But if someone else had a bad night, he couldn't accept that how great that just was. It was this kid. Or certain students would walk in that he had a problem connecting with. And you'd see that defeat in his face, and the whole class would reflect on that defeat. And he'd want to talk about that type of stuff every night. And at this point, me and him were pretty close friends. But when we would teach together, it was so rough. Because that, hey, class has ended. All right, let's talk about how I did that.
It's another example of you learning from the negative, from what you didn't want to do and be.
Yeah.
Exactly. Counterexamples. Now, I know that you met your wife through training.
Yes.
And she's told me some stories that make it surprising that she is now your wife.
Oh, yeah, no. Personality-wise, I can't believe she's my wife. When we first met and started talking, you said it earlier, I have a very strong personality, to say. And she she was so nice and so sweet. She still is most of the time. We rubbed off on each other a little bit. She's made me nice. I made her a little more aggressive and assertive.
I love it.
Like, she was so nice. It almost grossed me out sometimes. But that's opposite track.
She's told me some stories about early training and
Right.
things that occurred. And I'm trying to lead you. There's one story I'm hoping you will tell, and I'm trying to lead you to it without giving away the punchline.
Is it me breaking her ribs or?
Yeah.
So
tell us that story.
So our Saturday classes were a little bit less curriculum, just a lot more hard training.
Mhm.
We're going to crush you, make you work, hit that 100%, not slowing it down to learn that class. And where our classes set, we have an A and a B. So you do your forms in the A class and a lot more sparring self-defense in the B.
Mhm.
At the time, we had quite a few teens and adults in the class. So one of the funner things I do, if we didn't do it all the time, would I do like a 2-on-1 or try to do some group-esque sparring. And because the students always don't get to see what you do, I would jump in and I do, X amount of students versus me. So I did it with all the smaller kids first, and then I pulled the bigger students. You get to see how tall my wife really is, but compared to the rest of the class, she was considered one of the big students because she was one of the So it's her and a couple of bigger guys. I think there was 4 of them total. Might have been 5. I think it was 4. But in the grand scale, she was much smaller than the rest of them. So I hit a little bit harder because I'm not getting run over by my students. So we're sparring, and she jumped between 2 of the bigger students, and I caught her just right that I cracked a few ribs. And at the time, we had just started talking. I don't even know if we actually had our first date yet. It might have been close to that area of things. So she likes to say that I was trying to kick my way to her heart. I felt bad after class was over.
I think we're just putting this out in audio, so I need everyone to know that he may feel bad, but he's smiling ear to ear as he's telling this entire story. Please continue.
Yeah, no, in class, I will have very little sympathy. I will take you together and make you finish class.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as class is over, I'll see if you're actually okay. It's not bad. And that was kind of one of those moments. So every time we talk about, like, how you feeling? You all right? It was fun. She clearly doesn't mind. She shares the story more than I do.
Mm. She seems to enjoy telling it, and I think it's a fun story for me to hear because we've been pretty direct in the context of the show that the idea of instructors and students dating is incredibly risky.
Yeah.
And I know you acknowledge that, and most people do acknowledge that. But I think what I love about this story is that it's proof that no matter what was going to happen, you two were going to end up together.
Yeah.
If you can survive that, if the notion of you're not even quite beginning of a relationship can survive
some abuse,
demanding physical injury before it gets off the ground, and you still continue. I mean, that says everything I need to hear.
I think as we became more serious in dating, we moved in together. I think her deal with me as an instructor put a lot more testing on our relationship than me breaking her ribs.
Sure. And and I think, can you speak to that a little bit? Because just because I think that this is not a black and white discussion, and we have taken some flack for speaking out against it, not because it's never right, but because it is usually wrong.
I mean, I've taught at schools where it's been completely, hey, you can't do this, or I have to fire you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I get it, I understand it. I've taught with other instructors who have done it. Honestly, for me, My teen years, I dated a student, but I was teaching at one of our other locations. So the boss kind of was like, as long as it
Whole different dynamic.
yeah, but as long as it doesn't affect the school, they weren't making a big deal of it. It's kind of how I feel now. You're adults, make your own choices, but understand if things don't work, it can't come to the office. You're adults, figure it out. Me and my wife started talking because the instructor at the time, his wife helped run the office. So me and her became friends that way. And she trained at the same time too. And her and Jenny were about the same rank. So they were friendly on a different level. So those two would apparently talk about me.
So there is a conspiracy going even.
Yeah. I had a lot of rules. So I was never one that was really big on dating in general, not just at the school, just wasn't me. I had rules. And honestly, Jenny broke all of them. And it got to
which is probably why you liked her, because we heard from like the beginning of this conversation how much you dislike rules.
I don't want you to know where I live until I know that the relationship would work, kind of thing. I don't want you coming to work if we're in an argument or relationship. Like, that's not the place for it. But I've seen and experienced a lot of that, so I was like, wasn't gonna do it. But my buddy's wife was like, I'm tired of hearing her talk about you. I gave her your number. Whatever you two decide to do at that point, it's up to you. I don't want to hear it anymore. So at some point she messaged me, and I think we talked and just texted back and forth for a good 2 months before we even dated. Or officially dated, or had our first date, however you want to word that. To make sure that we were actually going to connect. To a certain point, the wife giving the number to Jenny really bothered me, but at the same point, I guess I get it. And I can't get too upset now.
I hope not. You're married, you have a child.
Something happened.
It kind of worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't be happier with that. But at the time, I was like, why? I have goals. But no, everything clearly worked out the way it should have. Actually, me and Jenny had met maybe 10 years or so before that without knowing it.
I didn't know this.
Yeah. So I just took over the second location, the school I trained in. They started that franchise. They had that second school.
Mm-hmm.
They brought me in for like 6 weeks on Saturdays. Like, hey, let's see how you're going to do on your own. 3 weeks in, I took over the school. Maybe 6 months to a year into that, one of the students had a birthday party at the school. Our oldest son attended that birthday party. So we had met without realizing we had met.
But if I'm doing correct math,
I would have been really young at the
time. I was looking for the right way to say this because, I'm not putting numbers on it publicly, but I know you are not exactly the same age.
No,
it's not inappropriate at this point.
No,
it would have been back then.
But no, that was something else fun. When we started dating, Jenny didn't realize how old I was until we had been I think we'll say 6 months into talking, dating, whatever. Because then my birthday had approached, and she's like, oh, okay. Yeah, she thought I was a bit older. Not that I'm complaining.
I love it. It's great.
But yeah, I was well aware walking into it. She just wasn't.
So what's next? What's next for you and teaching and training? Let's pretend we do a 5-year reunion on this.
So training wise, I just tested. I got promoted to 4th Dan.
Congratulations.
Thank you. At this point, I'm like ranking very little to me, even falling into training, which is very different from me and you talking before. Mm-hmm. But I have been a 3rd Dan for over a decade, we'll say. It's definitely a bit beyond that, but for at least a decade. And rank seemed irrelevant, so I could walk into a room full of masters or senior masters, high-ranking black belts, and not one of them would question my rank, where rank never played a factor, even with the ones that were, I'm a higher rank than you do as I say.
Mm-hmm.
There is no one ever questioned that with me. No one ever played that card because I still had the experience. I had the knowledge
Sure.
to back up whatever I said. And then last fall, so I might have been here. I guess we're getting pretty close to a year that I've been at this school. I say in theory I'll still be here. My personality is a little strong, and not everybody likes that. So
safe to say you would likely be teaching somewhere.
Yeah, I'll definitely be teaching. I don't think that'll ever go away, even if it's not my career. There'll be some type of teaching involved. But I've been here for about a year. The majority of what I've been here, they had me take over the office to help fix that side of things.
Mm-hmm.
We had another secondary instructor, but he had recently left. So when I walked in here, I had a lot of problems with how things were looking, how things were done. So since the other instructor left, I've had a lot of one-on-ones with students, how to be able to implement what I'd like to see at the school.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's not extreme yet, there's definitely change being made for the better, in my opinion, for the better.
Sure.
Normally when I step in and take over as an instructor at the school, there's a big loss in students because I have a higher expectation. I'm going to push them. No isn't really an option. There's no camp in karate. But I haven't had any that year here at the school. I don't think I've had any since I've started that were because of me, to my knowledge. And if it was minimal.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like a 30, like normally I'll step in at 30.
In any professional setting, when leadership changes, there are people who believe, even if it's not because of the leadership change, they see an opportunity, it stirs the pot enough that they're like, oh, I was going to go over here, do this or quit or whatever. Anyway, they needed a reason.
Yeah, when normally I step on the floor and take over completely, I see a 30 to 50% student base loss, which is high, I know, but it happens.
But do the numbers come back?
Usually within a 6-month period, depending on the size of the school.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not the end of the world. It's just a rough few months. But having a smaller base, when I take over, makes it easier to have the change I want by the time it picks back up.
That's right.
So I've said it a lot over the years. I'd rather have a school with like 10 to 15 students that I know are going to put in the effort and the time to become as great as they could be, instead of having 100 students that make me want to go home and bang my head on the wall.
Yeah.
And since COVID hit, I know a lot of schools are smaller. This school isn't huge, but it has a decent sized base. There's decent attendance. Our MIA students it's not very vast compared to the student base. And since I've started, there's been a few that have come back and have made comments on the changes I'm making, and they're all for it. So it's been a pretty positive thing here, I guess, especially lately. So I'm happy. I don't dread when they come in.
Nice.
Most of the time. So it's nice. It's getting to where I want it.
Good.
You actually get to see some of them.
I'm excited. Yeah. Listeners, I'll be down working with these guys at the end of the month. Actually, this is going to air after. By the time this airs, we will have already done that. So
gotcha.
we can't even preempt it. So, but I'm looking forward to finally connecting with
I don't have very
you guys
many
in person.
My school, but I think we're gonna have a small handful pushing. So
it'll be good.
Yeah,
it'll be good. We'll have fun. If not, like you just said, I don't care about numbers. I care about quality.
Yeah,
quality of character, quality of effort.
With the instructor who was here before me, we did have some time together, and he was all for. I'm not big on, hey, we're doing push-ups, do X amount or X amount of this. I'll do time, and that way I can focus on the quality over the quantity. And that concept seemed very foreign to him, and it threw me off at first. Like, no, I want them to do more and more and more. But if you do 1,000 bad push-ups, it's not going to give you the same benefit as 10 good ones. So we started doing more of that. And he was big on reps, like, hey, you guys don't hold the pad. I want you to do 5 left, 5 right all the time. Instead of, all right, do a certain time frame, pass it back and forth, switch legs, just reps.
I think it is rare in life that volume is a better use, a better yardstick than quality, or time. Yeah, in a lot of the training protocols that I develop, it's based on time, not number of repetitions, for the very reasons that you mentioned. You're not huge on public facing things, social media, etc. But if somebody did want to get a hold of you, is there a way?
I have no problem if they want to call me, but or they could always reach out through Jenny.
Okay.
Jenny will always pass stuff along. But I forget even what it was. I think at one point my Facebook got hacked a couple years ago, and I couldn't get the account back, and I wrote it off. I've been a lot happier without social media.
We're hearing more and more people say that.
We'll just say nonsense.
Yeah.
I tried starting up again when I started teaching at the school to connect with some of the parents. And as soon as I started doing that, I felt right back into it. I got rid of it. I don't even think it lasted 2 months.
I don't blame you. I
mean, if people want to reach me, they can email me, I guess. And at M as in Mary, N as Nancy, SA0035 at yahoo.com.
There you go.
I'm happy to talk anything, teaching, training, just whatever. I've had a few people I actually connected with through Facebook. I think some of them ended up, whether they're in other groups you're in on Facebook or whether it was actually from some of the whistlekick pages, that we ended up just shooting messages back and forth. And I think most of them were just like new instructors. I don't know what I say in comments sometimes. I just reactions be damned. But
yeah, there is tremendous value in having people around you that will always give you an honest opinion, and you are one of those people in my world, and I appreciate that. I know, usually I'm getting to you through Jenny, but if I want to know what you think on something, or if I want honest opinions, I make sure that whatever it is we're working on makes it to her and thus you. Because
she asks a lot of questions, and sometimes I think I said it earlier too, I'll get her opinion first, just argue the other side, just to hear all sides of it, not mine, just initial, hey, this is it.
It's the verbal equivalent of sparring.
Exactly.
If you can't step in and spar using, some of your worst techniques or with some kind of self-limitation, you're not fully developing. And
exactly.
Any good debate coach will say the same thing. If you can't argue, both sides of the issue, do you really understand it?
Understand the issue. Yeah. That's something I've been having a little bit of fun with here with some of our more advanced guys, because everything's been very black and white and what things do. So I've started doing some application with them.
Yep.
And then, now what do you think? I just want to see the wheels turn. If you're allowed to be wrong, but the only thing that's really wrong is if it doesn't work. So then I'll come up with ideas. I was like, so does that make sense to you? No. So then what else could it be? And I'll do that with almost every conversation. I do that with bosses at all the jobs I have. Some of them appreciate it. Some of them really, really don't. I do it with the kids a little bit. I don't think I ever really appreciated it as much, because a lot of people get very hard on their side of things, and they can't do the other side. They just want to get aggressive and they fight. But I did tree work for a couple of years, and one of the guys that I have on my crew, he was very big into reading on politics. but he wasn't opinionated, like super opinionated on it. He wouldn't stick to just his side. He was open to hearing everything. Everything you read is biased, whether it's one side or the other.
Sure.
It's very hard to find something that's not. But that would be our lunch break every day. We'd go in, we'd sit in the truck, we'd have lunch together, and he'd start with something, whatever he read that the night before or that morning.
Okay.
And we'd go back and forth, and sometimes it could get slightly heated, and whoever started the conversation, the other person would have to take the other side. Have to really know both sides. And as soon as lunch was over, you were cool again. It had all ended. You got to have that real conversation. I feel like that's kind of died off a lot too.
And that's how martial arts training should be, right? If you and I step in and we spar and we challenge each other, we push, we make each other better. Maybe we take a couple shots, hopefully you're not breaking my ribs, but apparently if you do, you've got ways to make it better.
Yeah, they might be jealous, so.
So I think, we make all these jokes within the martial arts, about friendship coming from punching each other in the face, but the further things divide in society, the more I look to that example of, we can challenge and push each other and quote unquote fight and get bruised and maybe even a little bloody at times. And at the end, thank each other for that opportunity to
absolutely
get better.
And you need that to get better. If you're always just nice or friendly, it's not going to get you there. Not only it's not going to get you there, but if you need it outside of class and outside of training, if you're always nice to each other, it's not going to work. But I think what you're talking about, banging each other up, getting a little bloody, bruised. I think I've made more friends at tournaments because we beat the crap out of each other, or one of us got disqualified for excessive contact. It was usually me. But we weren't mad at each other, but rules. But there were some of the better friendships I made for a long time. I would take a lot of weekends off to go do tournaments. I could hit 40 to 50 in 1 year, just trying to get rotations on my body would still allow it.
Yeah.
And I see people at constant tournaments, even though I didn't always remember their name, there was always that story, that whatever, and they'd pull someone else into that group, so that group would just keep growing. They'd show up, all right, so what are you doing this year? What form, what weapon?
Right.
There's something new and exciting that we'd see depending on how things went. Or we'd make jokes about did we stain your uniform last time, or
awesome.
How's your face? Sorry again, but you're handsome.
How's your face? Sorry.
Yeah, there was a guy. I jump heavyweight a lot when I compete. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm the biggest guy, but I end up with a lot of students. At least I used to. So I jump heavyweight and they'd stay lightweight just so we weren't the same division. I tried not to do stuff like that. But there was a guy who was bigger than me. He rocked me when he hit me. I don't care. It's part of training. It's fun. But I kicked him and caught him and he flipped him over the chairs into the next ring. And he thought that was awesome. But the judge flipped out. He's fine. I'm fine. Just let it go. Apologize. We can start the other ring. That's it. Come on back. That's well. We're good. Keep going.
Right on.
And then every year after that, there was people who didn't realize that was me at other tournaments, and then he would tell that story again, and they're like, "Oh, that's who did this, this, and this," because stories just got shared.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap it up here. You've told some good stories, and how do you want to close up? How do you want to?
I don't know.
Fade out.
I don't know. What would be a good fade out? Should I just tell you I love you?
No. that would be a first. 700 and some episodes. No, I don't think anybody has ever closed with that.
No, I think we can close with I like my personality. I have a lot of strong opinions on people, but you're one. Just like you said earlier, you're one of the few I like bouncing ideas off of. I like hearing your thought, even though I know we're not always going to agree.
I'm glad we don't always agree.
Because it's enlightening that you can do the same thing. You can have a conversation. No, we're not going to agree, and then we can still be friends. I know we could go, when you're younger, maybe we'll be lucky enough to train together. If we beat the crap out of each other, we're not going to hold a grudge over it. But I enjoy that because there aren't people like that. There's not a whole lot of people's opinion I can say I respect all the time, but you're one of those.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm glad Jenny found your podcast all those years ago.
Me too. Thanks for being such a supporter and for coming on. And glad I got to learn more about you. That was awesome.
Yeah, Jenny's the reason I heard about you. And I think she was a little mad because I think our first conversation was before you and her ex got to have a conversation. She's like, I've listened to all the shows, and you talked to him before me?
Well, I think she made up for lost time.
Yeah, just a bit.
Yeah, we talk a lot. All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Not a problem. I love you.
I'm always curious how much you as the audience can tell when I'm talking to a friend versus someone that I just met. One of my goals as an interviewer is to make sure that you feel the friendly elements when I'm talking to a stranger, but also the curious elements when I'm talking to a friend. Because when I get the opportunity to talk to someone that I know, that I like, I still want to learn more about them. I still take my role seriously. And I want to hear their journey. And as I get to hear these journeys of people like Matt, who I know a little bit, it allows me to fill in some gaps in who they are. I genuinely believe that the more we understand about the people around us, martial artists or not, the better our interactions are. When we know what people have been through, when we get the chance to, at least a bit figuratively even, walk in their shoes, I think there's a lot of value there. Matt had a great time. In a sense, this was long overdue, but at the same time, no, it happened when it should. Because now I get to see you my recording on this 9 days. I will see you in 9 days, and looking forward to that immensely. Hey, listeners, thanks for sticking around. Thanks for listening to this show, and thank you for your support of Whistlekick, whether that be financial or time or energy. It means a great deal. Remember, we have training programs at whistlekick.com. You can save 15% on those or anything else with the code podcast15. I would love to come to your school and teach a seminar. You can email me about that, or if you have feedback or topic suggestions, guest suggestions for the show, jeremy@whistlekick.com. Our social media, it's at Whistlekick. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch. I think that's where we are. We're on TikTok, but we're not doing anything with it right now. That may change as of when you're listening to this. Who knows? Check us out. I'm rambling, so it's time to go. Until next time, train hard, smile, and have a great day.